Hi everyone, and welcome to another video of the SAFI webinar series. In this video, we are going to have an overview of the Selection Toolbar. The Selection Toolbar contains a series of buttons that allows the user to select the model, specify what type of element they want to select, and also it has specific functions to help the user select specific elements in a model. The first series of buttons on the left-hand side allows the user to select by window, select all the model, deselect all the elements, and invert the current selection. We also find the commands Special Selection, Define Selection Group, and Fetch Selection Group. Next to it, we find a series of buttons that allows the user to enable or disable the possibility to select the different type of elements in the model. So, we find the buttons to enable or disable the possibility of selecting joints, members, physical members, plates, surfaces, spatial objects, integration lines, mesh contours, and walls. On the right-hand side, we find the buttons that specify how the selection works in the application. So, we find the button to activate the selection within the window, select crossing window, and also select according to mouse movement direction. And the last option is a dialog box that contains all the selection options available in this toolbar. Without further ado, let's start our demo. The Selection Toolbar is located at the top. If you don't see the Selection Toolbar on the top, you can display it by clicking on this button. You can also display or hide any toolbar by doing a right click here on the top, and you can see all the list of toolbars that are available. So you can simply display it from here. Let's explore the commands that are available on the Selection Toolbar. The first command on the left is the Select by Window, which you can activate by clicking on the key S. So you can activate the selection of any elements in the model by clicking on this button. Like we see on the screen, I'm selecting members and joints, but you can also activate it by simply clicking on the key S, which is a very user-friendly shortcut. So, to select any elements in the model, you need to draw a box. If you draw a box from the left to the right, you are going to select all the elements that are inside that box. If you draw a box from right to left, you will select the elements inside the box as well as all the elements that intersect with this box. These are two ways of selecting elements. You can also select specific elements by selecting that element just by clicking on it. The next button at the top is Select All. When you click on it to select all the elements in the model, you can also activate this command by using the shortcut Ctrl-A. The next button is the Deselect All, and by simply clicking on it, you will deselect all the current selection. The next button is the Invert Current Selection. For example, here if I select all the elements inside the model, we see here when I click on the Invert the Selection, I will select all the other elements that are not selected. We can also select multiple elements using the Shift key. For example, when I activate the selection command and I select the first element, if I click on the Shift key, you will see the cursor change the shape, and there is a plus button, and that is a plus sign next to it, which means if I select another element, it will add to the current selection. As you can see, we can do it one by one, or also by selecting using a box. If we want to remove an element from a selection, we can use the Control key. We will see a minus sign next to the cursor. So, if we want to remove these elements from the selection, I can do it like that. Next on the Selection Toolbar, we find a Special Selection command. The Special Selection command allows the user to select elements based on many criterions. If we select the Identifier Range criterion, we have some options that will appear here, which is the entity type. So, if we select the entity type, for example, member, and we select the identifier range, in this case, for example, from 1 to 10, and we click select, we will see on screen all the members that are within this identifier range. We can do the same for joints. So, if I select joints and I click on select, we will see on screen all the joints within that range. The other criterion that is available is a geometric range. So, in this case, we can specify a geometric range and the software will select automatically the entity type within that range. So, in this case, for example, if I select members, the entity type is a member. And the geometric range option in this case will keep the element within the range, which means the elements must be inside the range and can't be just close to the range. And then we select the range axes. So for example, if we keep the range axes Y, which means we are selecting the elements between 7 meters and 7.5 meters in the Y direction. And if I click select, we will see all the members within this range selected. The last criterion is element orientation. In the case of element orientation, we need to select an axis or a plane. So for example, if I click select, all elements that are in the plane X and Z, which is the horizontal plane, will be selected. If, for example, we do another example, we select all the elements in plane X and Y, all the elements that are parallel to this plane will be selected. We also have other options available here. We have the option to refine. The refine option will apply the selection criterion not to all the model, but for the current selection. For example, I already have a selection in my model. If I want to select, for example, the elements that are only in the Y and Z plane, I select this one. If I want to filter the element in the Y and Z from this current selection, I can use the Refine button. So in this case, it will keep only the elements from the current selection when I use the Refine button. When we use the Add button, it will add the selection to the current selection. And when we use the Remove button, it will remove the selection from the current selection. Next, we find the command Define Selection Group. So, when we click on this button, we have the option to save the current selection in a group. And we can give it a name. In this case, it will be column, and I will click OK. And when the selection is saved, the user can fetch the selection group by using this button to fetch the selection group. And in the list of selection groups, the last selection is the one we just created. If we want to select it again, we can simply select it from this list and click on the button Select, and we can fetch the selection group again. We also have the option to add to a selection group. So, if you want to, for example, select Add another element to the current selection, we can check this box and then click Select. So we can see that the selection group will be added to the new selection. If you want to just fetch one selection at a time, we keep this box and we check here. Next, on the Selection Toolbar, we see these series of buttons. And these buttons allow the user to enable or disable the selection ability of elements. For example, let's say you want to select only members and you don't want to select the joint. By default, the joints and members are active. If you want to select only joints, we can disable the members. And now, when we do the selection, you will see that the members are not selected. We can do that for other types of elements as well, including physical members, plates, surface load, spatial object, mesh contours, and also walls. Next on the selection toolbar, we find these three buttons. So, the first one, when we activate this option, when we do a selection from the left to the right or from the right to the left, it will automatically select only the elements within the selection box. The next button, when we activate it, when we do a selection from left to right or from right to left, the software always selects all the elements crossing the selection box. And the last one, which is the default selection option, when we activate it, when we do a selection from left to right, it selects everything within the selection box. And when we do a selection from the right to the left, it will select everything that is crossing the selection box. The last button, the selection option. When we click on it, we will open a dialog box that contains all the elements that are enabled for the selection. So, those are basically the options that we have here and the same option that we see on the selection toolbar. So basically, these options that we have in this dialog box are exactly the same buttons that we see on the selection toolbar. That's it for the selection toolbar. Thank you for watching this video, and catch you in another one of our webinar series videos.